Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Getting Hammered. I'm your host, Mary Catherine Ham. I'm here with my co-host, Vic Mattis of the Washington Free Beacon. We're your morning show for any hour. We have a lot of news today. There are Biden poll numbers. There's an immigration bill. There's weirdly a lot of news out of the Grammys. Just when you thought award shows didn't matter, they matter now. They matter today, Vic. But before we get to all that, how's it going?
Hello, Mary Catherine. Doing fine, and I just wanted to give a shout out to my good friends, Todd and Kathleen Palladino, their daughter Melina Rose, and Sue and Rich Covey, because they were the surprise guests at my birthday party birthday dinner. My birthday dinner on Friday. These are high school friends of mine, Todd and Sue. I went to high school with. I really was not expecting them. And in fact, both of them, they called me, "Oh, how are you?" And I was like, "What's that noise in the background? We can't make it." And they're like, "Oh, I'm in New York at the time," Todd says. And so we show up to the Palm, and I'm like, "Okay," I was thinking maybe it's local friends. Maybe it's, and we were with our kids. So I actually did think for a moment that it was going to be dinner with my in-laws. I'm like, "Oh, okay, here we go." And we turned the corner, and there they are. And I was taken aback, and it was you sort of have to switch, though, your mindset and mentality from sort of professional me to high school me. It's not pretty.
I think there's probably not that much modulation.
That's true. After like the second martini, it's all the same. And then we went around for a nightcap around the corner. It was lovely, and they were so generous. So thank you both for driving down and also for the wonderful dinner. And I am still in the process of losing that weekend weight.
Yeah.
Because that's what I'm finding now. It takes me about 5 days to shed the weight from 2 days.
You're just carb loading for the week.
For the week. I'm trying.
You need a lot of energy during the week to do the things that you need to do, and during the weekend you load up.
Oh, it's the other way around. Yeah, that's right. That's right. But
to work hard.
That's right. That's right. Except for if you end up having to go out during the weekday, then it gets more complicated. Then you're thrown off. I can see how this is hard for
you have to
a lot
be
of
careful.
people.
Yeah, it's you have to be a good planner.
I always wanted to do a piece on the perils of being the U.S. Secretary to the United Nations, because every ambassador, with the exception of Jeane Kirkpatrick, I saw, they go up there to the Waldorf Astoria, and then over the next few years, they just get larger and larger. They all did. I remember this with the late Bill Richardson, just got bigger.
That'll do
bigger.
it.
It's hard. I think it's very hard.
It is hard.
Anyway, that's what's going on with me. Mary Catherine, how are you?
Well, that reminds me that I'm going to go ahead and brag real quickly.
Oh, boy.
About I'm doing something called a transformation challenge with
You're always doing
Theory.
some sort of some sort of a challenge.
Well, that's because my brain works in short horizons, right? Like I need
objectives.
I've got 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks of work here that I'm going to do. Okay, what I found out while doing the transformation challenge, which is an Orange Theory thing. It's like 8 weeks of 3 times a week that you're trying to hit, right?
Orange Theory it's pretty intense already.
Right. It's like a high intensity interval training.
Yes.
Is what that one is.
Interval.
Although sometimes I just do the strength class because I like that. So in 2021, I also did this. Mm-hmm. And so that was, what was that, 2 babies ago? Anyway, the point being, several years ago, you do a weigh-in at the beginning of your event. So 2021, 21.6% body fat, 60.2 pounds skeletal muscle mass, 139.4 pounds.
How do they figure this out?
You get on the little machine and it tells you.
Wow.
January 23rd of this year.
Yeah.
21.6% body fat, 60.2 pounds skeletal muscle mass, 139.0 pounds.
So you are the same.
I'm the same as I was in 2021.
That's a great sign.
Which was 2 babies ago, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So
I think, having more babies.
That's what my challenges will get.
I think having more babies, your body becomes, all used to that.
It's used to it. It's used to it. Anyway, so I'm doing my challenge, which means I might even be stronger.
This is not a dietetic challenge. This is
no.
Strictly
none of my challenges have anything to do with diet. It's all I put all the weight, no pun intended, over on the exercise and activity part because I like to eat.
Yes.
I sometimes do like a modified low carb thing, but I'm not too strict about it. Although I will say, this weigh-in happened during dry January. So no doubt the removal of some of those calories was not bad for me.
Yes. Should have done it after New Year's.
Yeah, it's good. It's good for you. Speaking of health, I want to also note, I have a little parenting hack for folks. Okay. I don't think I've mentioned this on the show. My toddler is a very physical child. Speaks far less than her sisters did at this age. Not terribly concerned about it. But sometimes you want to get these things screened just to make sure there's not some underlying problem. So you get like a hearing test, and sometimes you'll do a speech evaluation.
Right, the hearing test is one of those things.
So because I have this minor concern, I went through the process of getting the hearing test scheduled, getting the early evaluation scheduled. And this is like partly through the state government because the early intervention program works that way. And so, as you can imagine, it requires several phone calls and then waiting for lots of phone calls and then delays in the scheduling of the appointments. And what I want to tell you is that if you have a minor concern about your child's developmental schedule, if you make a very complicated appointment for them that takes a long time to get and a lot of legwork by you, they will be fine by the time you get to the appointment. So,
like most things, you just give it a little time. It works itself out. So you're telling me.
So this week, the toddler, just speaking in sentences, saying all kinds of new words so that when we go into the appointment, they'll be like, what is she here for?
I think she probably didn't want to go to the doctor. So, all right, fine, I'll talk.
So nonetheless, we will do the thing because it is good. Screenings are good. More information than less is good for you. But
I'm glad though that she's getting chattier. Sometimes it just takes time. I was told that I was a very quiet kid. A baby. I still am, as you know.
Very quiet. No, I think she's an independent kid. She mostly gets done what she wants to get done without needing to speak up. And we have encouraged her, obviously, at times that she is frustrated and just wants to scream at us, that's not the way to do things.
Yes.
And so I think if I may give us some credit for continuing to encourage her, that yelling is not the way that she gets things.
There are a lot of adults who don't get that message.
Yeah, it's a hard one. So she is now speaking quite a bit more, and we'll find out more about that. But anyway, just a life hack.
Thank you.
You just need to do that part where you, like good news, of course.
It's great news.
So, all right.
Everyone's fear is, the child in Mr. Holland's Opus. You remember that? That fire engine and the baby's sleeping. Why didn't she wake up? No. Why didn't he wake up? And then Richard Dreyfuss comes back and he's talked from behind, but there's no reaction from behind to Cole's name. Okay.
She's always been like the proper amount of toddler obstinate versus hearing us. So we knew that like on that front, everything was, her hearing's fine.
Yeah.
But anyway, we had everything checked. So that's what's going on in our house. And so that's good news on that front. Lots of bad news for President Biden.
Yeah.
In the most recent polling, I believe we have a little bit of Kornacki from NBC, the numbers guy out there. He's going to lay out a little bit of what's going on here.
It's concerning to be behind Donald Trump at all, certainly by 5 points. That's the largest lead Trump's ever had over Biden in our polling. And I think what's more concerning from Biden's standpoint would probably be the overall trajectory of this. And I'm talking over the course of years, because we started polling Biden-Trump matchups back in October of 2019. Our very first poll back then had Biden ahead of Trump by 9 points. And you could see all the way, 12 polls in the 2020 election cycle that we took, Biden led in every single one of them. It never got closer than 6. The lead we tracked as high as 14 for Joe Biden. Of course, Biden ended up winning the popular vote by about 4.5 points. That was 2019. That was 2020. Now, this is our 4th poll this cycle. Starting, last June, we had Biden ahead by 4. That already was closer than any poll from 2020. And then from there, it went to a tie in the fall. It went to a slight Trump lead in November. And now, as you say, a Trump lead of 5 points. So not only is the entire political and polling atmosphere very different from what we saw in 2019 and 2020, even within that, there's a trend here that's developing in our poll where the news is getting worse for Biden.
So the trend is bad. The trend is bad for Biden. This is the biggest lead, strongest lead Trump has shown since they started polling this question in 2019. A couple other factoids from this. The overall poll shows a 5-point lead for Trump, 47-42. if Trump is convicted, Biden does lead, but only by 2.
Right.
Within the margin of error, 45-43.
For like a felony conviction.
We are 9 months from the election. He has a 37% approval. For comparison's sake, Obama's around the same time was fully 10 points higher at about 47.
It's George W. Bush territory towards
yeah.
the end of Bush's term.
Biden is down 22 points on handling the economy, 55-33. He's 35 points down on handling the border, 21 points down to Trump on handling crime, 16 points down on who is competent and effective, which is certainly a reversal from years past. The places where he does lead, 12-point advantage on how to handle abortion.
Of course.
And a 2-point lead on what for them is the ball game, protecting democracy.
That's right.
2 points.
2 points.
2 points for the whole argument y'all are making.
They have to push it more then. They have
guess.
to push it more. They got to ramp up the investigations against the people who are a threat to democracy.
I mean, this is pretty remarkable.
It is.
And it might be fool's gold, because it might be that when Trump is convicted, as I think he probably will be, at least in one of these situations.
91 counts. Many of which I think are bogus. But,
right. But the fact remains he's likely.
If you have
So maybe that evaporates and it looks very different after that comes to pass, should it come to pass. But that's amazing to me that it's within the margin of error if he's convicted. That is, the White House, if they knew enough to be scared, certainly would be scared by that.
These are all, what they'd like to think that all of these polls are outliers. And let's say the Quinnipiac poll that showed Biden up by about 6, that's where we're really heading.
Except it's the one that looks more like the outlier.
Exactly. That's not the definition of an outlier. And they're trying to figure out, why can't the American people realize how good they have it? Right? This is the Paul Krugman thing. Yeah,
I don't think that's a great argument.
So good. Why don't you see that? And this is the president that's presiding over. And I think of 2 things. One is that despite all the various macroeconomic victories, inflation is ticking downward. It's not down, but it's ticking downward, right? I mean, relative. And unemployment is very low, right? Mm-hmm. The economy is booming, they say.
And growth did look good this month. We should note, however, that every time growth looks good, it does end up getting revised downward later when we have more stats.
A couple weeks or a month later.
But I don't want to. I don't want to write it off.
But that
it matters.
Said, inflation, when it comes to particularly things like groceries, are still way higher than and the outpacing what people are making. That's one thing. And the second thing is, at least for me, and I'm sure for you, even if things are great, or getting better, I should say, not great, you're still not going to forget who put us in this mess in the first place.
Well, so I'd
like to think.
I think that might be part of it, right? Is that the inflation hits so close to home, people experience it regularly.
Yeah.
Everything.
It's expensive. Groceries are expensive.
Just is more expensive than you remember it being several years ago by a factor of many.
Yeah.
And one friend of the show, Jeremy Senderowitz, was tweeting about this. So I'm going to crib it from him. And he agrees with you that part of this is if they think you're responsible for the inflation, then they're not giving you a bunch of credit for slightly ticking downward.
Hey, look what I did. I cleaned up part of my mess.
Which, look, I would love to think that's the case, because I do think you should hold people accountable, as we have failed to do many times on things like COVID. Right?
But maybe they hope also that they forget, just like with COVID. We've always we talk about, and John Podhoretz used to talk about all the time, the reckoning, going into 2022, that reckoning has to happen. Didn't really quite happen. I mean, Anthony Fauci is still going around, and, you sort of erase it from your minds, the insanity of it all.
Right.
And in fact, when my friends were visiting, my friend Todd was just talking about during that time. He was a cameraman, and he was out of a job for a long time because you're not having anybody going into public. You're not filming. Everything is, nobody was working, and he
would having jobs. That was the
he would just go on these long walks every day because he said he was going out of his mind.
Yeah.
And I said, that's a lot of people. And think about people and the kids in schools. And so you'd like to think people remember. I always think, though, I wonder if the Democrats are trying to study Reagan's 84 playbook, because had the election taken place in 1982 or even early 83 in the midst of that recession, I think Reagan would have been in trouble. But things finally turned around, and then we hit the boom in 84, and he was set. And I feel like for them, for Biden and his team, this is the race that's going on. They have 11 months or 9 months away. Things are beginning to pick up on the macroeconomic level. When does it get to the microeconomic level and get people like finally realize, hey, wait a minute. Hey, I have it pretty good. I don't need to take my chance with the crazy person who is convicted.
Right. Well, and yet, unlike Reagan, are they setting us up for a boom? Because, they're the ones who spent all the money in the first place.
Right.
And then also you've got things, smaller things, but annoying things that can be potentially really damaging, like the AB5 style Department of Labor rule that I talked about that will affect freelancers. You've got everybody maybe needing to turn in their 1099s for their Venmos this year.
Yeah.
Just various trying to ban au pairs or ban all sorts of arrangements that work for people. I think could
death
work
by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah, that could work against them.
And everything, including the environmental stuff. So you're talking about,
that too.
Now they're backing off of the electric stoves thing because, after the comments period, but they were pushing for that. And obviously electric vehicles.
Well, then there was the LNG thing last week, which we haven't even talked about.
Yes, the liquefied natural gas, which we're, for the sake of the economy, we're not, for the sake of the climate, I should say, that we're not going to be, exporting that. And instead, these countries will go to China and Russia.
Yeah, we're just going to not do that? Is that the plan?
Not exactly cleaner than ours. So, great.
Okay.
I will say this, by the way.
Yeah.
My other thought is why Biden is doing bad is because there was an understanding, I think, that for people who voted for him, that he had one goal in life, which is to take out Donald Trump. Right. And he was going to be a transitional president. And he talked about the future leaders of this country going into the next, term in the century, the whole thing.
Right.
He's overstayed his welcome because you know what?
It would seem.
It turns out he likes power. And he basically spent 32 years running for this. He's finally gotten it. He's like, I'm not.
I ain't leaving now.
I don't care if I'm in a
and
wheelchair
by the way,
or a
he's
cane or whatever, a walker. I'm doing it.
He has been running for federal office since he was 29 years old. Like he doesn't know how to do anything else.
That's right.
And he wanted to be president since what? His first run was 88?
88.
So it's been a long time coming. And then he's also set up a great situation for himself, which is the only person whose numbers are lower than his, Kamala Harris. So you can't run her.
They're in a bind.
They're in a real bind there. I also want to note, we keep hearing about demographics that the Biden coalition must put together. And I want to say this. Again, things could change if and when Trump were convicted. Also, Democrats have shown an ability to bring everyone to the polls in numbers that look like they're excited, even when they're not excited. Yeah. Okay? Because they're often excited by the possibility of Trump. That's their negative inspiration to get to the polls. So we should keep those things in mind. However, we keep seeing in the New York Times Siena poll that non-white voters, particularly non-college educated non-white voters, turning away from Biden. He needs those folks. He needs huge numbers of non-white voters. And then the other thing in this, the gender gap.
Oh.
You guys ready for this? In 2020, Biden won women by 15 points. He's now up by 10, right? Mm-hmm. Which, especially if you're running on abortion and democracy, you would expect that number to be looking at least the same, if not better, right? He's down 8 among men in 2020. 2024 polling, Biden winning women by 10 and down 22 with men. So
the men are
getting worse in both directions.
The men have had it. And you were talking about the non-white voters, Hispanics in that poll. Trump now has a very small lead. He's not supposed to have, as a Republican, any lead. That was always the understanding.
Was
that, as long as we have 80% or 85% of the vote or 90%, then we'll be fine. Oh, these particular minorities. And the same thing with black voters. Not to the extent as Hispanic voters now who are turning to Trump.
Right.
It's really interesting. But you're beginning to see just within popular culture, if you will. I was thinking about Snoop Dogg apparently said something about Trump that was, somewhat positive. 50 Cent. It's like maybe Trump's. I think he was the one who said maybe Trump's the answer. And you're not hearing.
And as
this.
you know, famously endorsed by Waka Flocka Flame, whose name I'm not able to say right now. Waka Flocka Flame. That sounded almost like a cuss word, but it wasn't.
I almost
guys.
was like, we had to bleep that thing. Okay. Yeah. So, and you're not going to hear from the press. If they say if the people they like say things that, they don't want you to hear, they're not going to play that up and they're just going to ignore it.
Right. It's all very interesting.
Yeah.
Less than a year from the polls, guys. Yeah. And by the way, with early voting, it starts in October.
It started now.
So
in Pennsylvania,
they've already started
now. And and it's valid till 2025.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Shall we do a little bit of SNL news? There's a little bit of 2024 news on SNL this week. Nikki Haley takes the stage live from New York. First of all, I laughed at the Trump impression several times.
He's very good Trump.
And not only is he a good Trump, the dialogue is good.
Yeah.
Like
You can't just rely on the impression sense. It has to have good lines.
Yes. At one point he says that he's in South Carolina, one of the top 2 Carolinas.
Yeah. No, that's because it's not that far off from being believable. Like it's something that he would say, and that's the trick of it.
Dicky Tavi.
Yeah. Right. Ricky, don't lose that. It's a great number, by the way. A great song, by the way. So in fact, he's better than I think Alec Baldwin's was.
Right.
And they obviously can't have him back.
No.
And Daryl Hammond was really one of the best Trumps. He's one of the best impressionists out there.
By the way, that is James Austin Johnson.
Yeah.
Doing that impression. Anyway, so Nikki shows up.
What did you think?
As a South Carolina voter, asking Trump questions at this fake town hall. Look, she does a fine job, I think. There's another self-deprecating joke, which was
at the end?
A little bit of a painful one where a black voter asks her.
Yes. Played by Ayo Adebayo from The Bear.
Yes, says, hey, what would you say was the reason for the Civil War, and does it begin with an S and end with lavery? And Nikki Haley says, yeah, I probably should have said that the first time. Now, I think a couple of the lines are pretty decent. I think doing this gig is like kind of a no-brainer. Yeah. You get a lot of press. I thought the cold open was funnier than most. And then, of course, people are like falling all over themselves to say, Trump supporters are saying, oh, she's an elitist because she's on SNL. It's like, my dude, he hosted SNL.
Yeah, and you know what?
He hosted SNL.
The one skit that he on SNL, which, it's like the people at SNL, it's like this mark of shame for them now. They can't. I mean, it's like they won't even mention it. But
because they elevated him. They normalized him. That's the word they used. They normalized him.
But I have to say, for, politician candidates always now feel like, oh, if they get invited, they got to go, right. and Obama did it and he was not bad. There's this pressure, but it's very hard to pull off something that is actually genuinely funny because, you can be on the stump and you can do well with voters one-on-one and working the crowd. This is essentially stand-up, and the way it's acting.
Yeah.
And it's different. Reading a cue card or having it in front of you, even if you have your line memorized, there's a lot of pressure there. And these people, the actors, I mean, they do improv and stand up all the time. So this is their thing. It's much harder for a candidate to pull off. So, I don't know how much of it is that she's nervous or that, so it's a little stilted. Yes. But it was fine. I will say.
I liked the dead people joke.
Yes. No, again. And that was a good dig. And also, but to go back to Trump, when he hosted SNL, there was a video, he spoofed a Drake video.
Yes.
And his
I still laugh at that.
It's still funny where he says, I used to be, used to call your accountant. And he was good. I mean, but Trump has TV experiences.
Of course.
We know. Not just from The Apprentice, but going all the way back to maybe Home Alone 2.
Plus, he improvs every speech he ever gives.
Yes.
So.
He loves that.
Tons of experience. Other SNL news. Shane Gillis will be hosting SNL in February. Now, this is like one of our recurring segments, uncanceled.
Right.
Because Shane Gillis here has been uncanceled. He, in 2019, was hired as an up-and-coming comic, but he was not famous.
Right.
But they saw a tape. He did his audition. He did 5 minutes of stand-up for Lorne Michaels and the crew, and they had him to the callback, and then they decided that they were hiring him. This was at the same time that, notably, they hired their first Asian-American cast member.
And gay.
Yes.
Bo and Yang.
Yes.
So that was simultaneous.
So it was around the same time. I believe it was in the same hiring
I thought he was the replacement.
group.
Oh.
And then tweets were surfaced. No, it actually wasn't tweets. It was podcasts were surfaced, which is going to be our fate eventually.
How about that show I used to be on? Shocking I'm still here.
Podcasts were surfaced where he used some inappropriate language for
about
various
my people.
Minority groups. Yes. And he was promptly fired before he ever got to appear. But now he's back to host because after he got canceled for this and fired from his brand new job, he went on being a comic. And although he apologized, he did sort of the I apologize if people were offended, kind of, but I stand by my comedy and I'm going to keep being controversial. And he kept being controversial. Ish. I mean, he's not all that controversial. And it turns out that was really popular. He's become a huge
comic.
He's
huge now. Yeah. Doesn't he have a thing on Netflix? Is it?
Yes, he has, I believe it's called Beautiful Dogs.
Okay.
He also does a great Trump impression, by the way. But this is from the New York Times. Yeah. Since getting fired from Saturday Night Live in 2019 after videos surfaced of him using Asian and gay slurs on a podcast, Gillis has built perhaps one of the fastest growing comedy careers in America. His debut special, released on YouTube in 2021, racked up a staggering 14 million views. And he's the most popular podcaster on Patreon with 71,000 paying listeners. Beautiful Dogs, his second special, has been lodged in Netflix's top 10 most popular shows since the streamer released it on September 5th. He regularly sells out theaters. Don't be surprised if he becomes an arena act. That was about a year ago, that reporting, or 6 months ago, that reporting. So he's back to host.
Does this officially mean that, of all places, it's the same place that fired him now want him back? It's not like it turned out to be a mistake what he said on the podcast.
Well, so it's interesting because I think that canceled comedians are often interesting comedians. Yeah. And what SNL is having to do is to import an interesting comedian who they formerly fired because he's the hotness.
Does it mean that the cancel culture is now officially ebbing?
I'm not sure it means that, but let's
is Louis C.K. going to be the week after?
Maybe so. By the way, I believe I stole a joke from Gillis. I credited him. I didn't do Harvard style.
I've never done that.
I didn't do Harvard style. I credited him, but Shane Gillis is the one who said that when Biden's done with his speeches, he turns into a Roomba.
Yeah.
Which is just such a fantastic image. Here he is using, it must be noted, the R slur, as some refer to it. But here he is in some of his sort of typical stand-up.
I know I said retarded there a couple times. My bad on that. I'm not trying to give myself a pass on being able to use that word. But I will say, I don't know if you can tell by looking at me, I do have family members with Down syndrome. It almost got me. I dodged it, but it nicked me. Bit of a day walker myself. My Uncle Danny sneaks grilled cheese sandwiches into restaurants just in case they don't serve grilled cheese sandwiches. I don't know where he's getting these fucking things. It's the best. It's the best. You'll be out to dinner with him, you look across the table, you see him sneaking a grilled cheese. Just... Yo, where'd you get that cheese, Danny? His dad's with him. He's like, that he's been making them at night. I know he is. I'm not making them at night, Dad. Then he'll look at you and be like, I'm making them at night.
Yeah, he's back to host, but this is not the first time that a comedian has been fired from SNL and then brought back to host. In fact, I have a clip of another person who this happened to. The late great
Norm Macdonald.
I don't even, are we allowed to play that clip? Is SNL going to come after us? At any rate, Norm is funny. And that was his revenge monologue on SNL. So I think we can expect some fun stuff from Shane.
Well, I think it would be really good if they did a skit with Shane Gillis and Bo and Yang. Putting them in sort of, and perhaps you do a role reversal, where Shane Gillis has to pay somebody who's, gay and Asian.
Well, so. I do think it's interesting because Shane Gillis ended up sort of right-coded, right? He's like a little bit of like...
He's not, but... right?
But the thing, this is what it is. It's that the left and the entertainment industry are so incapable of accepting anyone even
if you do
moderately normal.
Well, they're extremely doctrinaire.
Right, that he's like, I'm not like some right-winger. And this New York Times piece that attempts to make sense of him is like, it's funny, it's odd, he makes fun of Red America, but like, he's also giving a satirical critique of the left. It's like, oh, is it comedy? Is that what it is, guys?
Well,
that sounds like what it might be.
Again, so much of the other side is just used to having one side being made fun of, and they don't actually like to be made fun of themselves. And so it's true. It's so disconcerting. What? How dare you say something? Because I thought I liked you. With Shane Gillis is interesting because I thought what might have gotten him in trouble is that, it was a podcast, but it seemed more conversation than it was stand-up or shtick. So you couldn't tell if what he was saying was actually him being honest about how down he was on Asian food, which I feel very strongly about, and also how he sort of belittled MSG, monosodium glutamate.
That was the problem for you.
Yeah, for me. I mean, because that's real umami. It's nothing to be dismissed as just some brown sauce. It's the real deal. It makes everything, and it's back to being good for you.
It really tracks that was your concern.
Yeah, I was like, how dare he go after the MSG? That food is good. Now he is right about the questionable meat.
Did he apologize for that?
No, I'm still waiting for that.
All right. Shall we do some Hill news?
Yes.
There's an immigration bill, guys, and that always means that things will go smoothly, and everyone will be in agreement. And there will be no tussles about what's actually in the bill. Wrong, actually the opposite of all of that. Opposite of all of that.
Finally, we got something that more than we could even ask for. Let's just pass this, conference it, and sign it. This is great.
Vic, we're going to help people try to make sense of this, but are we going to, though?
It's complicated.
It does feel complicated. Okay. So there is a Senate bipartisan immigration bill. Yeah. This rightly strikes fear into many people's hearts, particularly those who are interested in border security. Yeah. Because usually what happens with a bipartisan immigration deal is that you have a lot of promises about border security, and you have a lot of stuff you're giving away to the left in order to get those promises about border security. And then those promises about border security are never, ever, ever, ever fulfilled. Yeah. Okay, there's a long track record of this. So people are skeptical. The Republican who has been at the helm of this negotiation has been Senator Langford of Oklahoma. Yep. And people are mad. Okay, they don't like it.
Because it's too tough.
No. The concern is that it is not tough enough. And that, so what the main concern is that, look, border hawks, immigration hawks, of which I count myself at this point, even though I used to be a moderate because they've ticked me off so bad, say, we cannot, first of all, Biden has the ability with executive orders to reverse what he did when he came into office, to go back to the Trump baseline, to the Trump solution, frankly, solutions for which he deserves a lot of credit.
He just said, though, that his hands are tied. He's done everything he can do. Yeah. He can't do any more than that.
He needs Congress to act. Actually, let's hear a little clip of the always eloquent President Biden.
You need help. Why won't they give you the help all this time? And now they're starting about the border. It's out of control.
Okay, so the border's out of control because he did what he did. Also
right.
That. That's the other quote from that clip.
As if he
Sounds like my toddler.
As if he has an aversion to executive orders. It's the first thing he did going into office was reversing all of Trump's, stopping the wall. Got to stop the wall from being built. Come on.
We got to make ourselves a magnet.
Surge that.
We can't do stay in Mexico. Yeah. So now we have this insane baseline of is it 10,000 encounters a day? I mean, it's crazy. So millions and millions of people have come across the border.
Undocumented. We don't know. They go in. We have.
Right. Many of them are allowed in via very lax asylum processes where you just, as soon as you touch grass in America, you have to be processed that way. They give you a slip of paper that says, come back like 10 years from now for your check-in. I'm not even exaggerating. That's not even
Sometimes
it is 10 years.
No, it's like 20, 30 for some of these people.
So you just go live your life in America and then never come back for your court date, that's how that goes. Yeah. So now we have this crazy baseline, and this bill, I'm going to give it the good faith reading, attempts to say, okay, we've got this insane baseline of 10,000 per day. Let's give increased authority or repeat authority to say, if we hit 5,000, there's some controversy whether it's a day or a week. There is controversy about that. I do not know what the answer is. If we hit this 5,000 number, whether it's per day or per week, shut down the border, everybody gets turned away. Now, hawks make the correct argument that couldn't we just do that already?
Yeah.
Like, we could shut down the border now.
Right.
So they're saying, look, you're accepting the Biden baseline for this number, which is going to put us in a bad position moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Now, folks on the other side would say this is incrementalism. If we continue with this trajectory, millions more will come across by the time either Biden or Trump wins this election. Now, you could hope that Trump would change the situation, but Biden's certainly not going to. So they argue we could change the rules now to get fewer people coming in over those months.
Right.
And I believe there's a provision that would change the asylum rules so that they're much stricter.
Right.
So the touch grass in the U.S. thing would not apply anymore. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say one of the things you don't see in the bill is the usual Democratic demands for exchange. In exchange for amnesty, we will get tougher on the border, but everybody who's already here, the dreamers, we're going to help all these people. They're going to become American citizens. That's not in here.
I do think that is very notable.
Yeah.
Because in my memory, having been in this town for
it's
too
a big
long
surrender.
now,
That is always.
There's always an amnesty part, whether it's for some sympathetic group or a larger group or whoever's here now. And there is no part of that in this bill, which is interesting.
Right.
That does seem like a move in the correct direction.
It tells me that the Biden White House and Democrats do recognize how dire the situation is. Because, I mean, if they had their druthers, again, they'd let everybody in. And as long as you can keep them down in the red states, it doesn't matter to people in Martha's Vineyard.
Well, I do. That's what changed the calculation on this for everyone.
We should consider like Greg Abbott and Ron DeSantis vindicated because the initial outrage about the cruelty. Well, let's just limit the cruelty to your state is what they meant by it.
Yes.
As long as I don't have to see it, I'm all for the open borders and sanctuary cities.
And we'll just call you hateful for not dealing with it in stride.
Now I can't go to the Roosevelt Hotel.
I mean, there were I was reading about a rec center, I believe, in Massachusetts that's just completely taken over.
Yeah.
And the taxpayers of that town and the children who need the rec center cannot use the rec center.
And it initially baffled me because a lot of the countries in that triangle in Central America, when you talk about Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, it's anywhere between 3, 6, 7 million people total for the whole country. And we have like 2, 3 million, illegals here. Is it all empty? But the question is, should I just move down there now? Beachfront property. I'm going to Tegucigalpa, but in fact,
first on my list is Argentina, and then I'll go.
That's right.
Just for the Malay style vacay.
I go to Costa Rica, but you don't see a lot of Costa Ricans coming to this country illegally. But the truth is, they're coming from around the world. Yeah. That's the thing. Yes. They're coming from countries where you're worried about. Donald Trump has a much more brusque way of describing the people who are coming from the other countries. Yes. But you do have concerns. I mean, if they're coming from the Middle East or wherever,
as they
that's right.
Are often referred to.
That is a concern. But here's the other thing, Mary Catherine. I do think that the Senate Republicans are right that this is as good as it's going to get for these Democrats to be willing to give us that much.
Right.
And then maybe the half loaf, even a quarter loaf is better than no loaf. The Republicans, of course, in the House, like Mike Johnson, are arguing that, this is terrible. And there are a lot of the concerns that you mentioned and more, including, basically Alejandro Mayorkas at DHS has control over a lot of this.
That is a concern, right? Is that if you set new rules and or double super rules, like to rules that we already have, you're relying on the same people who are not enforcing the old rules to enforce the new rules.
Right.
And that does seem like a sucker's game.
Right.
That being said, let me read from the Border Patrol Union, which does not always reflect the rank and file views of the guys on the ground. But this is reported by Bill Malugin of Fox News, who is on the ground at the border all the time. Since Joe Biden has been in office, CBP has averaged over 6,700 apprehensions per day, and the vast majority have been released under a policy known as catch and release. Approximately 60% of all border apprehensions are single adults, a good number of whom are men of military age. The Border Act of 2024 will codify into law authorities that U.S. Border Patrol agents never had in the past. This will allow us to remove single adults expeditiously. Families would get a different treatment. And without a lengthy judicial review, which historically has required the release of these individuals into the interior of the U.S. This alone will drop illegal border crossings nationwide and will allow a great many of our agents to get back to detecting and apprehending those who want to cross our borders illegally and evade apprehension. While not perfect, the Border Act of 2024 is a step in the right direction and is far better than the status quo, which is why the National Border Patrol Council endorses this bill and hopes for a quick passage. I don't think you're getting quick passage. You might get a discussion about it, but yeah. So that's there's also an internal memo in the Border Patrol says similar things. There are new rules in here that could actually be useful tools for us.
Right.
So
right. And add on to that, by the way, the other aid package for Israel, Ukraine,
yes,
Taiwan,
right,
even CENTCOM, Middle East, and their Red Sea operations. And you can make the argument that they can agree to these things separately, but the fact is, it's all in here. And if you agree to this, that this border bill that is the toughest that they think you'll ever extract from these Democrats, and in addition to that, throw in the aid to these countries, and they're in dire need, and the U.S. military is in dire need of this as well. This would be a good thing to do. That said, the House Republicans can just argue that if we wait 11 months, maybe we'll get a better deal. But I don't think the world can wait 11 months.
Well, this is okay. Yes, I am concerned with what's happening day to day right now. And could you change that? However, Republicans have a point when they say, okay, so we're going to have a giant, divisive, nasty conversation within our caucus about this thing, right? And in the end, are we actually going to get enforcement? Because if we trade a political issue for a sucker's deal and no enforcement, then that makes no sense for us, even if some good faith people argue that you will get it. I think it's reasonable to assume you wouldn't. I think it's reasonable to assume that. They not only is Mayorkas in charge of some of these things, but it goes straight to
based on past performance, as they say.
Who's like, isn't he under impeachment right now for not enforcing things? Okay. And then it also goes for review to the D.C. Circuit Court versus another federal court, which is much more liberal.
Right.
So people are concerned. And I do think that in all of these deals forever, there's been a public trust problem because the enforcement part never comes to pass unless you're Donald Trump, and you do actually get credit for that, right? And he did most of that with the pen in the phone, Obama style, with executive orders. But it actually worked.
Yeah.
And people remember that. Moving forward, do I think that people are going to buy from Biden that the border is bad because Republicans wouldn't help him on this one bill? I don't think they're going to buy that.
They're hoping for that. I mean, this is the political hand grenade, and it's like going back and forth, and who's going to get blamed for it? Because they will do, and probably the media will do everything in their power to say, see, they had a good deal, but they turned it down because they're, it's all politically motivated. They don't actually care about all these things. That is going to happen. Yeah. And the fact is, it's going to happen because the bill is basically dead. It's not going through the House. Right. So, I mean, everything that we're discussing even now.
By the way, the Wall Street Journal, which doesn't help with the Freedom Caucus in the House, by the way, the Wall Street Journal endorsement says if Republicans reject this bill, they will hand Democrats an argument that the GOP wants border chaos that they can exploit as a campaign issue. The chaos will continue for at least another year. That's the part I'm genuinely worried about. Yeah. Republicans may think they can write a better law if Mr. Trump wins in November, but don't count on it. Democrats will again demand much more in return. If Republicans pass up this rare chance at border reform, they may not get a better one. I'm torn on this one, man.
Yeah, no, here's the fear. The fear, again, if you go back for fewer Republicans, strictly speaking from a political point of view, of course, is, we do our job, even if we do it well, like in 1996, Gingrich and the House Republicans, and they forced Clinton's hand to sign the Welfare to Work bill. Everything is great. The Democrats on the far left, I remember them decrying Bill Clinton. Rob Reiner, condemning Bill Clinton's actions for signing this Welfare to Work bill to force people to work. That's unheard of. And of course, Clinton won handily. That was in the summer of 96, and then he won in November. And you can't help but think that that's part of the calculus for House Republicans as well, is that, they're removing this wedge issue, and that, it's going to...
my friend Guy Benson has a nice rundown of all of this and suggests that, why not make the passage and implementation of this legislation contingent upon Biden reversing the foolish, reflexive executive policies he put into place at the very start of 2021? I mean, we could wish. I mean, that would be a sign of good faith from the White House that, hey, we actually think this is a problem, and we noticed that the things we did made it worse. But you ain't getting that.
No one's getting
from
that.
this.
No.
From this White House. By the way, another guy who's not helping sell the bill is Chris Murphy of the Democratic Senate caucus, who notes that don't worry, guys. He's tweeting like, "Don't worry, guys. The border won't actually close." And it's like, so don't keep that inside.
Yeah, said the quiet part out loud.
The border never closes, but claims must be processed at the ports. Is what he's saying. Anyway, there's a lot of
people want the border closed.
God, they really do. They really do. Them's the facts, Vic.
I'm glad that we had a very decisive.
Look, I wish
taken a very strong stand.
I wish I was decisive about this one. My gut says don't believe anything from these people. That's what my gut says.
Yeah.
If I were on the Hill, that's the proposition position
it.
I'd be arguing for.
I think you could pay a price for that, but we'll see. Yeah. We'll see what happens. But again, the House Republicans are
we're sort of nominally on opposite sides of this one. Like just barely.
We are.
Tepidly on opposite sides.
I would be.
Like Hannity and Combs.
I would be just like. Oh, don't make me Combs, please. I know I have glasses.
Never. This is good. We're giving our listeners a safe space.
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
This is how it feels. Maybe you feel the same way.
All right. We got to finish up with some Grammy talk.
Oh my gosh.
We got a few minutes.
Let's do it. We do. We do.
This is actually yet another uncanceled moment, which is that remember the Washington Post wrote about how Tracy Chapman's fast car being covered by
Emily
countries.
Yar in the
countries.
Post,
Luke Combs was terrible. It was it was a complicated case of cultural appropriation, and it highlighted lack of diversity in Nashville and just doomsday.
Yeah. Well, it was the whole thing that she'd never be a country music star because she's queer and country music people.
Yes. Well, that's the argument. Except now she also had like a top country hit for most of the year. Yeah. That's her writing credit on the beautiful, I would argue,
royalties to her.
I would argue maybe perfect song, Fast Car.
Yeah.
First brought to the world's attention at a Wembley Stadium tribute, I believe, to Nelson Mandela.
Wow.
Where she was, legend has it, I believe this is correct. Someone else was supposed to perform in that slot. She had already performed earlier, I think to a less high stakes situation. Mm-hmm. And then someone couldn't perform. I believe it was Stevie Wonder, and she had to be put out on stage. And she does this song, which is a very quiet song.
It is,
right?
It became such a big hit when that song came out. And in fact, my sister had the album. I remember we listened to it. She had it on vinyl.
Right. We did too. It was a big one.
Who is this person?
Yeah. So she performed it at Wembley Stadium to this, like an arena, an open arena. And with her single guitar and her voice, she silenced this crowd with this song. Well, so after this Washington Post piece comes out, we all have a tortured cultural conversation about whether it's okay to like Fast Car if Luke Combs is doing it. I'm excited about it because Luke Combs, a white guy from North Carolina, his father introduced him to the song of a black woman in 1988.
Yeah.
Queer.
Yeah.
Right? This is the thing. This can't happen in our racist country. And yet it did.
They don't want it to happen. That's the thing. They don't want it to happen. They like the separation.
And Luke Combs loved this song so much that he covered it, made it a #1 hit on the country charts, bringing it to a whole new generation. He didn't even change the lyrics. He had so much respect for her that he made it, I work in the market as a checkout girl. Didn't change it. And Tracy Chapman, who is quite reclusive, did issue some statements saying, like, I'm proud that it's at the top of the country song. But she didn't speak about it a lot.
And she also replied to that Post piece by saying, my goal is never to top the country charts.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Then comes the Grammys.
Oh, yeah.
And Tracy Chapman, who has not performed this song in forever.
No. She's older now, and I realize if she's older, that means I'm older.
You are.
That's so depressing.
Shows up, if you watch the Wembley thing, I mean, she's a baby. Yeah. She's like, I think she was 20-something.
Yeah.
She comes out on stage with Luke Combs, candlelight sort of situation behind them. She had a super cool outfit on, by the way. Just like very understated, very Tracy Chapman.
Yes.
And they perform Fast Car together, trading verses. And when the crowd went wild for her, she teared up a little bit. The smile on her face. I'm surprised she got through the first line because it was very clear she was emotional.
Yeah.
And it was so beautiful.
It was. Best performance?
I mean, you got to give it to that one.
Yeah. Also Billy Joel.
Did Billy Joel do his new song?
Oh, he did. Turn the Lights Back On, which is kind of reminds me of She's Always Woman, and I mean that as a compliment.
Yeah.
Similar chord shifts and progressions. But there was a lot going on in this Grammys, and I wanted to say
hold on.
this.
First,
okay.
let's do
good. I didn't know you had a
Let's do
clip.
a little clip of Fast Car just so we get the opening of that.
I got a job that pays all our bills. Stay out drinking late at the bar. Some more your friends than you do your kids. I'd always hope for better. But maybe together you and me find it. I got no plans, I ain't going nowhere. Take your best car and keep on driving.
But really beautiful moment. Okay,
Yes.
so then we have Billy Joel. I didn't even know this one.
No, and that was they saved that to the end, so I ended up having to watch it later on the news because they tease these things out and later on. I had zero interest in watching these Grammys except for that my daughter is big on it because she loves obviously Taylor Swift, Olivia Rodrigo, and a new up and coming star in a more jazz pop category. Her name is Leve, and she won the Grammy for best, I think, traditional pop album. And I have to tell you, I've heard the whole album, and it's amazing.
Nice.
And she's half Chinese, half Icelandic, so 100% hot. I mean, talented, and just.
She's actually the guest on SNL with Shane Gillis.
No, she's not.
Not true.
Oh, okay, but she's performing at Radio City Music Hall. So my daughter saw her when she was still at the doing a small venue at the Lincoln Theater, and now she's become this big hit, and she's so sweet and so humble, and just adorable. So she won the Grammy, and then at the Billy Joel's performance, there she is playing. Not only does she play piano, she was playing the cello.
No, of course, you guys always play a lot of instruments.
Our people are pretty talented, Mary Catherine.
So
sorry. Well, you got to keep that in.
all right.
Okay. Oh, but then Annie Lennox.
Oh yeah, we don't. I'm not even going to play her.
Don't play her. But
Annie
she's
Lennox.
And I like Annie. She's from Eurythmics.
Decided to talk about ceasefire, right?
Yes, she just said at the very end.
I guess her song wasn't about how Hamas was offered a ceasefire, and they were like, "Nah."
They keep on turning
pass.
it down, and they have hostages. It was Artists for Ceasefire, Peace Around the World.
Okay. By the way, I believe that political statement from her was during the In Memoriam.
Yes, it was.
In poor taste.
Yeah.
In poor taste.
No.
This is not about you. Okay. Then we have, speaking of making news,
Right.
Taylor Swift
Oh, yes.
announces a new
And apparently this
album.
is a big deal for her to announce a new album
I'm
because
told it is.
uh,
The Swifties have told me it's a large deal. But she announces this new album that's coming out April 19th. It is called Tortured Poets Department.
Dead Poet Society was already taken.
That was taken.
Yeah.
I am not a Swiftie, and therefore I'm not read in on all the Easter eggs and
I'll explain.
all the numerology.
Yes.
beh-
Yes.
behind
How do you
all
know
of this.
about this?
Well, I just know it exists, but I don't spend a lot of time on it. But this is a theory that I am going to back. Remember, Taylor Swift pre-Travis Kelce dated that British actor guy who was not really into
Harry
it.
Styles.
No.
Sorry.
What was his name? Joe Alwyn.
Oh,
Alwyn.
okay.
Alwyn. Yeah, Joe Alwyn.
That was Harry Styles?
For many years. And he was didn't talk about her in public. It was not a publicly embraced situation. It didn't seem super. So they break up. Now she's with Travis Kelce.
Good.
This is
Twice the man that guy must have been.
This is a Twitter theory. April 19th is known as the shot heard around the world, the start of the revolution. The battles of Lexington and Concord on April 19th, 1775 are considered the start of the American Revolution. Taylor is declaring her independence in song from a certain Britain. And I love this ridiculous, based, patriotic
That's great.
theory about April 19th. Here for it. I'm sure it's made up. Okay.
So my daughter mentions this when she's a total Swiftie, of course, and most of these young teens, they're all into this. And she was telling me about depending on what outfit she's wearing, So if you see her at a Chiefs game at Arrowhead, she's wearing this color or that color. It could mean this. It could mean
It
that.
all matters.
Because,
It's a puzzle
she's
box.
bringing
Vic.
back the old albums after she had that big dispute, the financial dispute, with and so it's either that or maybe it's going to be new material. And so she goes up there, and the numerology you mentioned, these Easter eggs is insane. She goes up, I said, oh, great, she won. And all of a sudden, I'm like, no, it's just going to be an acceptance speech. And then she mentions a new album, and the reaction from my daughter, it was as if they were telling me that the Beatles were getting back together.
Yeah,
somehow they brought them back from the dead, and they're here tonight to perform a new album.
Big deal.
Yeah. That was pretty crazy. It was pretty crazy.
And then one last thing.
Yeah.
I believe Jay-Z was receiving some sort of like impact award. It sounded like a lifetime achievement type deal. And he had something to say about the fact that Beyonce has won a ton of Grammys, but she's never won Album of the Year, which is surprising. I remember when Lemonade came out, people were real mad that didn't win Album of the Year. But I also think that just like better part of valor just to accept your award.
You know what?
She has tons of Grammys.
And after he did it, didn't he go over and grab Taylor Swift's Grammy from her? Oh, wait a minute. That was somebody else.
That was a different guy.
That was somebody guy. Okay. Yeah. I do want to mention this really quickly because it's my band, U2, that Bono, they were performing, I think it was in the Sphere. Nevertheless, he mentions October 7, and it's there's always this little quiet interlude when they do the live performance of Pride in the Name of Love, which was dedicated to Martin Luther King.
Right.
And he gets to do his soapbox routine.
In the light of what's happened in Israel and Gaza, a song about non-violence seems somewhat ridiculous, even laughable, but our prayers have always been for peace and for non-violence. So
he changes the lyric, which was the original is early morning, April 4, shots ring out in the Memphis sky, and instead it's October 7. And he talks about, he said, those beautiful people and the stars of David, they took your life, but they couldn't take your pride. And that is really surprising because they always go out of the way to say, we're for nonviolence, we're about peace, blah, blah, blah. And they've always been that way. Greenpeace, Amnesty International, and they emerged out of the troubles in Ireland. I could talk about this for an hour, by the way. But in the end...
You got some numerology for us?
I do. Oh, believe me. In the song Vertigo, he says, uno, dos, tres, catorce, because the 14 is the 14th album. That's why he says that. That's in Vertigo.
Which is only one off from Taylor Swift's.
Okay. So in any event, good for them because, I don't know if that crowd was into that.
No, and I think the Grammys themselves also institutionally, there was a person on stage who I believe was like a honcho who mentioned the Nova Music Festival specifically.
Okay, good.
Some more than 250 people killed at a music festival, which seems like a logical thing to pay tribute to.
It's unspeakable.
Like insane.
Yeah.
It seems like a logical thing to pay tribute to at the Grammys, but like you said, the crowd in the room, maybe they didn't pan the camera during that part of the speech, I wonder. But I'm glad that those two things happened.
Yes.
That makes me feel better. Do we have a few minutes for Elmo?
Oh, right. All right, give it to me.
Okay.
Okay, this is a segment called Vic Doesn't Know
Vic doesn't know what's happening.
I don't know what's happening. So I don't know. This is true. She's about to tell me something that I have no idea about.
Okay. This is the New York Times story from the beginning of this controversy. On Monday, the X account for Elmo, the fuzzy red monster, this is about a week ago, from Sesame Street, posed a softball question to its almost 500,000 followers. Elmo is just checking in. How is everybody doing? In thousands of responses, social media users let Elmo know that no, actually, they were not doing too hot. Elmo, I'm depressed and broke, one wrote. Others told Elmo that they had been laid off or they were anxious about the 2024 election or that their dog had rolled around in goose feces. So, a wide range. A lot of trauma dumping on Elmo, which I would say, guys, this is like rule of thumb.
Yeah.
If someone is still young enough to be referring to themselves in third person, don't trauma dump on them. That's not your place for that. Elmo's he's a Muppet, but he's a child Muppet. Like, let's just,
You're not going to get a lot of child responses, though, because it's on X. I hope there's not a lot of kids on
No.
Twitter.
I'm just saying the adults need to not be dumping on Elmo.
But they did, this was, and they used Elmo, I guess.
Yeah, they went all in on this. Okay. Oh. But then Elmo showed up on the Today Show to talk about mental health awareness.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Emotional well-being. Sure. Okay. That's a healthy conversation. Yeah. But who was there was Larry David. Also on the show that day, and we're going to play a little bit of... This is Joy Behar of The View explaining what happened on Today.
The new season of Curb Your Enthusiasm hasn't even started yet, but it feels like we're all living in an episode right now. After what Larry David did to Elmo on the Today Show yesterday. Watch.
Let's go over to Alfred, check the weather. And
Not yet.
Wait.
Cut away to the weather, and then they go back to Elmo real quick on the Today Show, who's behind the couch being puppeteered, and Larry David physically attacking Elmo. So, and then he walks away. He's walking away grinning. Okay.
Ask permission before you touch people, Larry.
Larry, you've gone too far this time.
Yes, Larry. Somebody had to do it.
Say you're sorry.
Elmo,
Larry?
I just want to apologize.
Thank you, Larry. Elmo accepts your apology.
Oh, he said he accepts it. Oh,
Okay, cool.
okay. All right, thank you.
So that's what happened on the Today Show. What's your position on Larry David attacking Elmo?
It's a great promo to get people ready to watch the final season. It's not even, it's the final, it's the series finale of Curb Your Enthusiasm.
I mean,
so you might as well go out with some pizzazz and do something
episode.
shocking,
Yeah.
like assaulting a puppet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then The View proceeds to have a discussion about whether this was okay. Here we go.
Okay, so people are outraged, that it's a puppet, folks, okay?
It's a Muppet.
There's a puppeteer with his hand up Elmo's behind. He didn't attack a person. He attacked the felt, okay?
So that's Joy Behar. Yeah. She's in the It's Fine to Attack Elmo camp.
Mary Catherine, I was going to say, how dare you put me in a position of siding with Joy Behar? These are dark times. How dare you?
Look, as I said on Twitter, I think after being trauma dumped on all week, Elmo was probably glad to run into somebody who wasn't a total puss. Are we allowed to say that on this show?
On that note, that wraps up this rather lengthy episode of Getting Hammered. Remember, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube, and you can follow me on Twitter at Victorina Mattis.
I'm at MK Hammer on Twitter, at MK Hammer Time on Instagram. Elmo's going to be teaching resilience classes after he's had that run-in with Larry David, and that's what the nation needs. A lot more resilience, a lot less trauma dumping, so I wish him the best. Thanks for getting hammered responsibly. This has been a Nebulous Media podcast.